Hi, hello, it's me, Unkempt Snugglepepper, and we're back for another episode of Art Critiques. Don't worry, my long form content is also going to happen. Today, we have a person who wants help with getting proportions and getting the basic drawing of the face down. However, they want it to be specifically with this reference, which is a cool reference. And in this piece, I'm going to identify 3 problems and their solutions going forward. Let's get into it. Problem number 1 is you picked a rather complex reference to start with. In that, you have this yellow light coming in from one side, but you also have this blue light illuminating the other side. So that's going to make it a bit more complicated. In addition, his head is tilting downward and he's at a 3/4 view. One of those things I can fix, and that is the color and the light source. For me, if I'm trying to draw features or if I'm starting in black and white, it is easiest if I also put my reference in black and white. So what I'm going to do is go over to layers. I fill in a layer completely black and then go to layer mode and select saturation. And this works in Clip Studio that I'm in, Photoshop, Krita, Procreate. It will make everything underneath that layer appear black and white without having to change the piece to being black and white. Now, as for tilting down and 3/4 view, that carries on over since we're going to stick with this reference. So my second problem is I think you're relying too much on visual library and not enough on your reference. So visual library is what tells us that the eyes are an almond shape or a circle. And as we draw, when people say paint what you see, not what you know, that's what they mean. So the solution to this is to think about the functionality of different features, to start to break them down into simpler shapes. We have the shape of the eye. He's looking down. We have the fold of the eyelid, the eyelashes on both sides, and this shadow where the eye is receding into the socket. And then this shadow, also from the socket and the eyelid, casting shadows. And then we have this highlight on the side where our second light source is coming in. And so we have some light there and a second light as we get into the brow. Being able to recognize this shadow shape and this shadow shape are going to be very helpful. Because right now we're thinking of how can we get the features in the right place. And as we move into shading, as we move into value to define the form rather than lines, we want to know how things function. So as we're going down the forehead and we hit the eyebrow, we then start to move into the eye socket. We come out again for the eyelid, in and out again for the eye, the lower lid, and then down the cheek. We can draw another line right here. There's the brow bone. It moves in, moves over the eye, moves over the eyeball under the lid, the lower lid, and then his cheeks. There's no rules that says you can't draw on your reference. Whenever I have a reference in person, I draw on it. I put little blobs of paint to make sure that I have the right colors. So in your rendition, I'm seeing that the lips appear to be front facing, the eyes are drawn as if they're front facing, and it looks like you struggle a little bit with the shape of the nose, wanting to draw the other nostril. And so a lot of this is based on recognizing the facial feature, but not being able to break it down into simpler shapes. How do I build my visual library? By studying individual features, looking at various tutorials. The wonderful thing about art is there's so many artists out there who create educational content, and there's no one single way to do things. There's so many ways to look at the face and facial features. Now, the third problem is going to be trying to eyeball it. I think this tip might be the most helpful for you, and that is being able to recognize lines within the face as well as how to measure the face using facial features. So we have our nose that goes up to here, and then I can take that measurement, and it's a little further up starts his hairline, and about a nose length down is his jaw. So if I place your nose there, that tells me where the hairline is, and it tells me where the bottom of the jaw is. The beautiful thing about digital is that you can trace over your reference. You can draw lines wherever you need over your reference. And when they are no longer useful, you can remove those lines. So here I have the nose and what lines up with the top of the nose. And then I also have the angle of the nose, which is straight. So my biggest recommendation is to start making these lines, and as you're making them on the reference, continue to make them on the artwork as well. That is halfway in between. So this is where our lower lip should be. Right, so the center line goes down like this. If you look about halfway, that's his bottom lip and his top lip. Now I can also draw lines going vertically as well. So as I go straight down from the eye, I should be touching the edge of the nose. And the more I sketch, the more loose you stay, the more you have the opportunity to get the line correct. And I wouldn't worry about little details. All the lines you have around the eye is far too much detail before you're putting in the very foundation of the face. I'm going to simplify his cheek with a single line. And when I take the inner corner and come down, that tells me that I've made my nose come out too far. I think what happened is that in your nose, you are looking at the straight line of the nose, but you're trying to make this space where the nose meets the brow bone. However, that happens much higher up. And then his eyebrows don't arch quite as much. So there's other ways to look at the face as well. These are plumb lines. It's taking a reference within the photo and applying it to the canvas. So I know where the inner corner of his eye is. I know the outer corner of his eye should be there. And then I have an eye space in between and my outer eye. So I think that's what's happening when you're trying to do the proportions, is that you're eyeballing it. And rather than really studying your reference and then going back into your drawing, you're spending too much time on your drawing without referring back to the reference, which is fairly common. It's hard to make ourselves continue to look at the reference. So the 3 problems we identified today was having a complex reference, and one of the ways in which you can simplify a reference by turning it black and white. We talked about relying on visual library and not trusting our reference. And the solution to that is to better study the reference by understanding the features and their functions. And then problem 3, we talked about eyeballing a drawing rather than using the reference to get proportions from. And we talked about how to use plumb lines and how to use facial measurements in order to better sketch out our portraits. If you found this helpful, please give a like. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, be sure to leave that down in the comments section. And last but not least, if you would like to submit your artwork to be critiqued, you can submit it through the link down in the doobly-doo.